Good evening, pre-algebra. Mr. Lawrence here with your flipped lesson for January 27th for the weekend. Today we're going to be talking about quadrilaterals. And don't ask Tony Brooks about them because he'll tell you if it's got four sides, it's a square, and he knows it's not right. But quadrilaterals. A quadrilateral's definition is a four-sided polygon. And remember, a polygon is not what happens when your parrot runs away for home. All right, a four-sided polygon. So we have quadrilaterals. Now, some quadrilaterals have special things about them, like a square. But we're not going to talk about that yet. We're just talking about quadrilaterals. So, the quadrilateral family starts with all four-sided polygons. Remember, a polygon is a closed 2D shape with three or more sides. So if we're talking about quadrilaterals, we're talking about a closed two-dimensional shape with four sides. All right? Now, they could look like this. Oops, that's not a very good one. Let me redraw that. Could look something like this. That is a quadrilateral. Okay? It could look kind of like this. Let's see here. Kind of like that. Okay. A square is a type of quadrilateral, but it's a very special quadrilateral, so we'll talk about that later. In fact, I don't even want to put that here. Okay. In fact, if I remember right, there's 16 different types of quadrilaterals, but we're going to have to investigate. Now, quadrilaterals can be broken up, and Jason White will tell you something about this because he mentioned it on Friday's class. They can be broken up into groups or families based on how many parallel sides they have. Okay, you might have quadrilaterals with 0 parallel sides. Okay, this symbol means parallel. Looks like a really long 11. Parallel. Okay, there's two L's in parallel. That's what it's like. 0 parallel sides. And these guys here would fit into that. Oh my goodness. I lost my quadrilateral. There are no sides parallel there. Oh, those two do kind of look parallel, don't they? Let me redraw that so that it definitely does not look parallel. All right, so there we go. That doesn't look parallel. Those aren't the only ones, but if there's 0 parallel sides, we just call it a plain old quadrilateral. Okay. Now, there's another type of quadrilateral. These type of quadrilaterals have one pair parallel sides. And those have a special name. Those are called the trapezoids. Those are the trapezoids. If you have a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides, it is a trapezoid. Guaranteed. And some trapezoids will look like this. Okay. And some trapezoids will look more like this. Okay, of course it could be turned any different direction, but note that these sides here are parallel. When you see little arrows on there, that means parallel. Okay, it doesn't mean congruent, it means parallel. When they're just the little marks, you know, like these guys, that's congruent. All right, so they're trapezoids. Now, there's really not much about the trapezoids. There's basically two types. One's a right trapezoid and one's just plain old trapezoid. So right trapezoid because it has a right angle in it. All right, now there is another type, and this type has lots of different members. These are the ones that have two pairs of parallel sides. Okay. These are called the parallelograms. Parallelograms. Okay. Now, if you have a hard time remembering, a parallelogram looks like a tired rectangle. That's what it looks like. It looks like a tired rectangle. Let me see if I can draw a parallelogram for you. I'll bet I can draw a real pretty one. There you go. There's the parallelograms. And in the parallelograms, we have two pairs of parallel sides. This side is parallel to that side, and those are parallel to each other. It's not a rectangle because rectangles have other characteristics. It's not a square because squares have other characteristics. Okay, now the parallelogram is kind of like the grandpa, and he had a couple of kids. and you see the parallelogram, two pairs of parallel sides, sometimes this parallelogram has four congruent sides. A parallelogram with four congruent sides, those are called the rhombus, or rhombi for plural, the rhombi, okay? A rhombus is the singular version, rhombus is the plural. Now, if you have a hard time remembering, a rhombus looks like a tired square, okay? I think that one looks pretty good. You're going to have parallel, but all four sides are also going to be the same measure, congruent, okay? So the rhombus, so the parallelogram had a child called the rhombus. It was like the parallelogram. It had two pairs of parallel sides, but all four were the same exact length, and so they called them rhombus. Now, it had another child, and this one has four congruent angles. Four angles are all congruent. In fact, they're all 90 degrees. Okay, these are your rectangles. These are your rectangles. Now, I know you know what a rectangle looks like. Okay, we're not to squares yet, because the squares they're more specific than this. To be a rectangle, you have to be a parallelogram, have two pairs of parallel sides, and to have four right angles. That makes a rectangle. To be a rhombus, you have to have two pairs of parallel sides, be a parallelogram, and have four sides congruent. Now, the rhombus and the rectangle got together and went to West Virginia, and they had a child, and that child is the square. Part of my bad joke there. Sorry about that. Is the square. Why is it the squares? The squares show up right here, squares. Because squares are parallelograms. They have two pairs of parallel sides, right? So they have two pairs of parallel sides, like all parallelograms do, okay? But they also have all four sides congruent, just like the rhombus, four congruent sides. Now, not only that, but they also have four right angles, just like a rectangle. Okay, so they have four right angles, or four congruent angles. So the square is a special type of rhombus. It's also a special type of rectangle, and it's a very, very special type of parallelogram, and of course it is also a quadrilateral. Okay, all those classifications fit. So hopefully you get this chart down. There it is, 0 pairs of parallel sides. There's other quadrilaterals that could work. I mean, I think this one would fit here with 0 pairs of parallel sides. It's a little bit different than the one above it. Okay, and you have your one pair of parallel sides, the trapezoids. One pair of parallel sides makes a trapezoid. If there's two pairs of parallel sides, those are your parallelograms. And the parallelograms have lots of kids. Okay, two pairs of parallel sides, plain old parallelogram. If the four sides are congruent, it's a rhombus. Okay, and if the four angles are congruent, in fact they're all 90 degrees, it's a rectangle. And if all three of those things are true, it's a quadrilateral with two pairs of parallel sides, four congruent sides, four right angles, or four congruent angles, either way. Those are your squares. Okay, so classifying squares and classifying quadrilaterals is the whole point of the lesson. This should be pretty easy and maybe even a little bit fun. All right, that's your lesson. It's very short. Some of you remember, if you didn't watch the video for Friday, you need to watch this one. All right, Mr. Lawrence signing off.